Welcome everyone to our virtual Connect series that continues today with a conversation with our Award of Excellence recipients from our honor awards for AIA Colorado this year. As a reminder, you'll get one learning unit for attending today's session. And we're excited to have a panel of our highest award winners joining us today for a panel discussion. It's not just a conversation among ourselves, however, we ask you to use the Q&A function so you can ask your own questions and interject those into the conversation. And we'll get to those after we get through our own questions to start the dialogue. And without further ado, two notes to add. One, the Award of Excellence level of our design awards is the one in which the jury that gets selected each year has unanimous decision and feels like these are the top, no objections, no debate whatsoever. These projects deserve some kind of award and some kind of recognition. And then the other levels have at least a majority or stronger than that. So these are the ones that are the best in show, if you will, of all the submissions that we receive. Now, our panelists today are those design principals or lead designers of those projects, and they are the following. As I see them on my screen, we'll start with Mike Piche, Principal of Studio B Architects. Hi, Mike. Mike's the recipient of an Award of Excellence for the Vista Drive Pavilion. It's a new construction project, and the jury was impressed with how this project achieves a lot with the little. The project is a simple plan in building form that contains great gestures. Quoting there from the jury. Next, we have Renee Delgodio. Hi, Renee.
Hi.
Renee has her own studio under the same name, Renee Delgodio Architecture. She is the recipient of an Honor Award of Excellence for Mariposa Garden House, submitted for a renovation project. The jury felt that this addition truly understood and respected the existing space. Despite it being a small addition, the design enhanced the entire building. And finally, we have Bryan Schmidt. Hello, Bryan. Bryan's a principal of Semple Brown, and he's a recipient of an Award of Excellence for Kent Denver Middle School. It's a new construction project over 15,000 square feet. And the jury felt that the project exemplifies how all schools should feel inviting and open. It is a beautiful place to be and to learn. So that's what the jury said. Now I want to hear what you guys say about these projects. And really, before we get into the projects themselves, maybe familiarize yourselves with the people who are watching today, just about how you got into architecture, how you approach projects and come to a style or typology of your work. Let's start in the order I introduced everybody. So Mike, you want to go first on that one?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Again, I'm Mike Bichay. I'm Principal of Studio B Architectures and Interiors. For those of you who don't know, our firm was originally founded in 1991 in Aspen by Scott Lindenau. We have offices in both Aspen and in Boulder. We have 5 people in the Boulder studio and 8 people in the Aspen studio. So I direct the Boulder studio. But our studios are pretty highly collaborative, so we work and collaborate between the 2 offices on a variety of designs. And we opened up the Boulder studio about 5 years ago. I grew up in Boulder, went to Boulder High, went to CU for undergrad, and then Michigan for grad school. I think at Studio B, we are known for modern design. We're known for real simple, clear diagrams. And to get there, our process relies on a lot of iteration, a lot of editing, and a lot of restraint.
Thanks, Mike. And Renee.
I'm Renee Delgodio. I'm a one-woman architecture shop based in Boulder. I actually used to work with Bryan at Semple Brown Design. Started my own practice about 9 years ago. I don't love, when I think about my process and my approach, I don't like really thinking about style. I prefer rather to think about a philosophy or an approach. And I would say that my design approach is a constant striving towards or working towards creating an authentic regional architecture, an architecture that responds directly to our Rocky Mountain region, our climate, our culture, our history, specifically to our environment. So when I approach each project, I like to start by asking myself, how can I most deeply tie the project to the place where it's being built? And I think I gauge success when we never get there, it's a constant striving, but I think I gauge the question I'm always asking is it tied so deeply to place that you can no longer imagine the building anywhere else?
That's great. Thanks, Renee. And Bryan.
Hello, I'm Bryan Schmitz. I'm the principal at Semple Design. We're a roughly 30-person firm in Denver. I will say that historically, I became an architect because in 4th grade, I took an aptitude test that told me I should be either an artist or an architect. And I knew that artists had a hard time making a living. I didn't know any architects, so I didn't know any better. But from that time forward, went down the path as best I could of trying to become what I imagined an architect might be, in spite of the fact that I didn't know any. I have been at Semple Brown for nearly 25 years now. And I think that one of the things that typifies my philosophy for design, and that you see exhibited really well with the Kent Denver Middle School, is this sense that Renee was starting to describe of what I'll call contextualism. How does it fit into its place? And for me, contextual architecture has to do with not only the adjacent site, but the adjacent buildings, the history of the site. The program is also tremendously important. And I'll say that from a process perspective, I don't have any idea what a building is going to look like. What matters first and foremost is that it works, that it functions, that the adjacencies are as they should be, that the circulation works like it should. And then I kind of sort of start thinking about what it's going to look like and how to really knit it into the rest of that context. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the middle school, but those are the things that are really paramount to me in the design process.
Great. Thanks, Bryan. I want to ask each of you what made you decide to submit your project for an AIA Design Award, but maybe a little bit differently each time. I know, Renee, when you've talked about being a member of AIA Colorado, that this is something that's very important to a one-person firm, that doesn't have a marketing department, that doesn't have a series of studios or a research and development arm. So for you, your answer might be a little bit different than what we'll hear from Mike or Bryan, but that question I would pose is, what made you decide to submit your project for an honor award? Maybe not necessarily even this particular project, but to participate in it.
Well, you're absolutely right. From the perspective of a one-person firm, putting your work out there through the process of the AIA Awards is absolute top way to get your work in front of the community. Put it out there in front of the community, students, potential future clients. I mean, it's a very powerful tool for someone who doesn't do any marketing. And I really think it's a way for all of us to show leadership in the future of the landscape of Colorado. What is the landscape of Colorado going to look like when we pass it on to the next generation? And we have to be showing these really powerful, exemplary projects as what we think the direction of the future is. We need to be showing low carbon footprint projects, beautiful design projects that we're really proud of and that we think make Colorado a better place. I think that's a huge responsibility for all of us.
Yeah. And Mike, I know this isn't your first go around, of course, and for a lot of these people, they're multiple award winners over the course of the program's history. But what keeps you coming back and using this awards program as something that you bring your projects to and put it before another jury each year?
Yeah, I think I have a variety of reasons. One being that submitting in, winning is just a great way to kind of celebrate the hard work, the long hours, all the dedication by the numerous collaborators that are involved in the project. You know, it's a fun way for those who participated to be recognized for hopefully doing something special, something great, and something unique. You know, another reason is a little bit of kind of either validation or feedback that, you know, we may think we're doing kind of great work, but you know, that's just us. So having your project reviewed, critiqued by an unbiased jury is a great way to kind of put yourself out there to see what, you know, what others think and to join in a conversation. I mean, it's always, you know, really super great honor. It's really nice to be able to kind of win, but not every project gets there too. So for those projects of ours that are not so successful, you know, it can be a great way to kind of force you to think about ways you can kind of improve on the next project, what worked, what didn't. And, you know, I think as Renee outlined too, it's a great way to kind of get some exposure, knowing it for new clients. I think it's a good exposure for your collaborators, both on the project, future ones, and a good way to kind of reach out to potential future internal collaborators and staff. And at the end, it's, you know, can be a kind of a fun event too. I felt like the drive-in movie theater event this year was actually pretty fun and a welcome change from, you know, the quarantine time too. So thanks for everyone that kind of put the hard work into doing that. The drive-in was pretty brilliant. So I had a good time.
Good. Well, we had a good time making the video production and hosting the event. That was a spur of the moment sort of brainstorm of how can we do something different but still safe, where we can bring the profession together to celebrate all this good work. So, you know, we've talked internally about maybe even without all these public health restrictions, maybe we keep doing it that way, you know. But I'm glad that you liked it, and stay tuned for what comes next. We'll see what happens next year.
All right.
Bryan, you know, for a firm that does a middle school project or any school project, you know, it's a larger team, obviously, and so your decision as to whether to bring a project forward to the design jury is a little bit different than these other projects, which are new construction and renovation of a single family house. So describe a little bit about your thought process internally, you know, bringing a project forward to this jury.
You know, the notion of validation is no less important. We all work really, really hard. I'm certain of that. And it's nice to get that personally. It's nice to get that on behalf of the broader team, because even Renee, as a sole practitioner, I'm sure works with other people. There are structural engineers and landscape designers and so forth. And so it's nice because we all know that the three of us who are up here are not the only ones who made these things happen, and that there are other people who are part of the process, and they need some recognition as well. And so it's nice to know that not only is our design acumen being validated, but it's our leadership of the teams that we're working with. It's also important. And for a client like Kent Denver School, there's marketing, quite frankly, involved in that. They are in a competitive industry of independent schools, and it's nice for them to be able to say that they have X number of design award winning projects across the campus. And LEED certification is another thing that they pride themselves on, and they've got a number of sort of benchmarks that are important to them that they like to tap to prospective families that keep them competitive. And it's validation for them that the direction that they're choosing to pursue as an institution is worthwhile. It helps with donations that fund these buildings and so forth. But selfishly, yeah, we love it. We work hard. It's nice to get that recognition that's really hard to come by. I know we don't do a very good job internally at Semple Brown of patting ourselves on the back for the hard work that we've done. I do want to say one thing to the people who submitted projects that maybe didn't win. Don't give up. That doesn't mean that your project is any less worthy. You know, Mike and Renee and I were fortunate enough to have been chosen this year, but that's not to say that next year you won't be chosen for your projects. Keep up the good fight. Keep endeavoring to do good work. That's why we're here.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Bryan. I definitely want to echo that. There aren't, you know, it's fun to observe the jury in the process and see them look at all the nominations that come in, and there aren't any bad ones really. It's just which are the ones that that particular jury likes as the best of a lot of good projects. And the odds are not really great for a submitter, to be honest with you. You know, it's greater than a 10-to-1 odd against a nominee getting selected for recognition. So it really is a higher level, and you have to run the gauntlet, so to speak. But we know that, and I said this in the remarks at the awards event, that any project that gets built is a minor miracle. So just celebrating the fact that you made it to the day of the ribbon cutting is an award in and of itself. But then to have your peers say, this is some of the best of the work that goes on in this profession is probably an extra special compliment. And I'm sure you go into the process very confident as you think of all the things that you can submit over the eligibility period of going back a few years of completed projects. But then there's a bit of anxiety that comes with it too. Oh, are they going to like it, or are they going to dislike it? Or I know we had to make a little bit of a decision that got value engineered out, and maybe they'll see that, maybe they won't. So there's a lot of mental gymnastics that are happening both on the jury side and on the submitter side. So as we transition now specifically about the projects themselves, maybe we'll pick back up with you, Bryan, on the Kent Middle School. So if among your portfolio of projects, it wouldn't make sense to just submit everything you could and write up a nomination for each one. What makes you say, we really want to highlight this project internally as a firm and bring it forward and hope that it stands out among the crowd?
Well, there's a handful of things that come to mind for that project for me. One is that it just has some interesting, and this is sort of superficial, some interesting sculptural, formal aspects to it that for somebody who's paid attention to juries over the past years, you look at it and you say, yeah, this is maybe the kind of thing that a jury would be receptive to, again, on a fairly superficial level. A second thing that dives a little bit deeper into the process is that as a project, it is a LEED Platinum project, and that's no small feat on top of being what I think is a fairly attractive project. And then the third aspect to it that really I think distinguishes it, and that is my favorite part of the project, is just that as a school facility, for somebody who's really willing to look, who's intrigued by those first two aspects that I described, and looks at the plans and looks more deeply at the photos and at the program, they can see how it works from a pedagogical standpoint. They can see that it's different and innovative and forward thinking, rather than looking at the way that schools have traditionally been done. And it really is, it's almost cliche-ish now that we're that we're into 2020, to say it's a school for the 21st century, in that it really does draw on this sense that people don't all learn in the same way, that the days of a teacher standing up in front of the classroom and preaching to their students the way that they should do things isn't how it works anymore. And I think that for those of us who are parents, I've always believed that students, whether it was me in college and architecture school or my kids in their respective schools, you learn every bit as, if not more, from your classmates than you do from your teachers. And we were talking before the program started about how those opportunities for socialization and integration and communication, collaboration, and all of those things are so important to the broader concept of education these days. And I think that this project really does that in spades. And I'm glad to see that the jury was able to see that. I think that was one of the distinguishing features of it. So if you're an introvert, if you're an extrovert, this as a facility caters to all different types and allows for all of them to coexist. And so I think that's what distinguished this project for us among the many others that we could have chosen to submit. And so I'm very gratified by that.
Bryan, what do you take from the jury comment that when they said this is how all schools should look? I don't think that was an endorsement for prototypical design or stock plan.
No, I think it's more, if we look at the big photo that's up on the screen now, this common space, and the idea of the social stair sort of element is not new, but I think what's different about this particular place is that this is both their primary circulation path through the building. It is the thing that as you walk into the building, you see through this space to the outdoors, connecting it to the environment. It's a social space, it's a teaching space, it's an assembly space, and it's in the smack dab in the middle of everything. And so this collaboration, multifunction space is the beating heart of this whole facility. And I think that's what the jury saw when they were looking at this. And then if you look at the two other images of the exterior, you can see the overhang on the right-hand side there. And that's just an example of another kind of collaborative space, but it's outside. And that's one of the things that this project does really well, is extend little tendrils from the interior programmatic elements into the site. And they do, as a faculty, as an institution, a really great job of taking their classes out into the surrounding landscape to talk about biology, to talk about math and science. And so it's really integrated into the site in a pretty profound way. And they take full advantage of that. And so those are the kinds of things that I'm hoping that the jury saw and that they were talking about. It's the type of place that I would love to have gone to school as a kid.
So maybe to paraphrase, the jury meant to say this is how every school should work in terms of its programmatic feature of this central gathering space, but it's well executed and beautiful at the same time. So
that's what I'd hope they were thinking. Yes, thank you.
Okay, you can quote me on that.
Okay.
Mike, let's talk about your project, because you know, this is year 2 in a row of getting the Award of Excellence recognition for 2 very different projects. And I'm curious, for Vista Drive Pavilion, really interesting is, as you said in your video message, to work with these clients and be given the kind of latitude that they gave you to really explore a lot of ideas here. Tell us a little bit about that experience designing this project.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, winning 2 years in a row is, you know, obviously pretty cool, and we're honored for that too. And it's nice to, I don't know, kind of anxious following up when you have a high award too, being able to try and follow up with something else that ends up being a, you know, a great project as well. So lucky we've had, you know, some amazing clients that really kind of help facilitate that. For this project, we really had a blast working on it. You know, like I said, most successful projects start with a great client, and we definitely had that one. She was engaged, open to ideas, and was really kind of direct when she needed to be. We had a great contractor in MK Construction and a great landscape architect in our design. So they were, you know, really amazing to collaborate as well. And then internally, Raquel Mayorga was great on the interiors, and we had Robbie Cuthbert, who was banging out really kind of great models throughout the whole project too. So we had a pretty fun team, you know. And working on the Vista Drive Pavilion, it's really located in this mid-century neighborhood with a lot of mid-century ranch houses. There's very few actual kind of sidewalks in this neighborhood, so it almost has this kind of park-like feel to it, which was kind of a nice inspiration for us as well too. So we felt like we could do a project that was really almost felt like almost an object within it, even like the Saranen's Miller House in Columbus. So as we started thinking about the project, we had an approach to it that felt like could be pretty successful. And oddly enough, on the last project, we were last year's floor project, we were introduced to this artist named Robert Kelly, and Robert Kelly creates these wonderful warm tone layered black and white collages. And one of the collages really kind of struck us that they had shown us too. It had these great kind of color blocks at the perimeter, and there's very kind of interstitial fun space in between. There's almost like this great figure ground that was kind of creating, but all the spaces in between were very kind of irregular, but very free flowing. So we thought that could be a great inspiration for architecture. And there was just so much kind of layering and collaging that was and levels of transparency in artwork. So we really want to try and figure out a way that maybe we translate that into architecture. So we ended up having these programmatic spaces in it being blocks where it's the primary bedroom, kids' bedrooms, the garage, and then some of the utility spaces that we made. Those are kind of the blocks. And then we created more of this, similar to this interstitial space in between, that instead of kind of having a program, we kind of line up kitchen, living, dining, those kind of things, more kind of standard programmatic elements of the house, that all of those were kind of separated and free flowing and at different scales and sizes that surround these other more intimate private spaces. So within that too, then we ended up elevating the roof over the kind of the middle of the house, where the kitchen ends up being the hub in the middle, and then it tapers down to the side where we have the more intimate private spaces. And at the end of each one of these public space, we had a glimpse out to the exterior. So we're, you know, both to be able to look out, see the landscape, see trees, see the neighborhood, but also to kind of bring in light on every different side. So throughout the day, the light is constantly changing throughout. It really reflects on the ceiling and really actually kind of creates a very layered space, that transparency that you're getting in the qualities of the artwork. So as we were doing that, you know, what we felt like, we ended up with this great kind of floating pavilion, this black floating silhouette, but that really contained a collage of form and light, which we thought was a successful concept and diagram, and ultimately, you know, an interesting piece of architecture.
And when you have such a rigorous and well-conceived partie, you know, every little move has to be considered. And so, you know, deciding what artist and what particular piece to put in a space can change the whole feel of something in a project like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's a project too that wasn't, you know, on the spectrum of some of our houses that we do. You know, it was not on the high end, kind of the budget spectrum too. So I think that process really kind of helped to edit and refine. And we had some other schemes and options too that ended up having more complexity to it. But the more we went through that process of editing and refining, then it really helped reinforce that diagram. So on the images shown here, that front aperture, you know, that's just one element, public space that's there. The bottom right image, kind of that same thing. And, you know, and each one of those apertures really brings in that amazing kind of light and that great quality that you see in that upper right image. So throughout the day, it's totally changing and really kind of fun.
Well, cool project. Let's turn it over to Renee now to talk about Mariposa Garden House. So that is a renovation, so it had to be somewhat respectful of what was there before, but it's, you know, I don't think you would get that right away looking at these pictures to say, oh, it's a renovation of something that was already in existence. It looks so seamless as to what, as it seems to be from the same hand, the same mind, regardless of which piece was built when. And I mean, it's not only AIA that thought this, it was the Colorado Homes and Lifestyles also recognized it with an Editor's Choice Award. So this was a really popular selection, not just among the architects who saw it, but others as well. So tell us about this project and why it's a gem in your mind.
So the design concept for this project is a house of gardens and light. And that concept comes from the original home, which was built in 1948, a 1,700 square foot ranch house, typical ranch stock of mid-century Boulder, very low ceilings, terrible floor plan. But the original house had one very redeeming quality in that it had a very interesting footprint. Complex, not a simple footprint, lots of turns. And within each turn of the footprint was a garden. And that quality, that connection to the landscape was not only what the owners loved about the house originally, because they lived in this home for, I think 8 or 9 years before we did this renovation, but it was such a strong quality that it became the concept for the new house. So we decided to take that connection to the landscape and just make it even stronger. So we removed the wall, the home was not built well. We removed the roof and the walls and took the exact footprint and rebuilt new energy efficient walls in that footprint. And then we added about 700 square feet to the east and an additional about 1,000 square feet as an upper level. And then we took the garage, which was originally on the street, and moved it back to the alley and designed a detached studio connected to that garage. So now there's this relationship between the main house opening up to the north to the biggest garden and this detached studio across the garden. And, you know, blowing out the entire interior floor plan, we placed cooking, dining, living at the heart of the home. And then all of the intimate spaces we laid out at the periphery and then rebuilt these gardens. They're like pocket gardens in between this existing footprint and really emphasized, we had Marpa Landscape on the team. We really emphasized this connection between these intimate periphery spaces and those gardens. So because the design concept for the house was about gardens and light, the whole project is just inherently sustainable in that every space has natural light, passive cooling. The main space, the main central space has the highest ceiling at 12 feet. You can see in the image on the left that Megan has up, they're motorized clerestory windows that ring that central space to release hot air. And then there's a 3-inch exposed concrete slab on the main level to moderate temperatures. We also put an 8 kilowatt PV array on the roof so the house runs net zero electric. The main space has a 16-foot wide sliding door system that opens out to the main garden and connects the circulation out to the detached studio. And the real or the only formal element of the design is this 2-story brick chimney that's placed at the heart of the circulation, and it really anchors that circulation. So whether you're arriving at the house from the alley, which the owners do on a daily basis, you literally walk through the inside of the chimney. That dark brick masonry lines the interior walls, the interior ceiling. So you're walking through that chimney, which is a small mudroom. You can drop your bag, walk around to the inside, and it becomes an indoor fireplace. You can see on the image on the left for the kitchen dining area. On the outside, it becomes this cooking grill adjacent to the outdoor fire pit. So it creates this beautiful evening situation. And then if you circulate through it and upstairs out through the master bedroom roof deck, it becomes a second fireplace, more private feeling for the master bedroom. So yeah, every decision made in this project was based on the environment. It has this really modest footprint, super tight envelope, passive cooling, renewable energy. And then the floor plan is very simple, just anchored around this masonry chimney that directs the circulation. Everything flows through or around that chimney. Yeah.
Fair to call it a total transformation, I would say. And what I like about this project in particular is you've got about a 70-year span between, you know, its original construction post-war and where we are today. And yet it doesn't feel like it's from any particular era or decade of that or particular style. It might have been built in 1948 if those materials were available at the time, and it could have been built at any time in between, including today. So And I think the style would look good well into the future too. So it's really interesting when you take these renovation projects and make the decision not to go with a particular theme or era or style in a sense.
Mhm.
So we hope that as you talk about these projects after literally living with them for a number of months, eat, breathe, sleep, the solutions to what your clients have said they want you to address, that there are some happy memories, but there's probably also some, I remember when we had to deal with that. So let's start with what was something that comes to mind as you talk about these projects again and look back through the lens of getting recognized with an award that you're particularly proud of, or that you knew this is some of our best work. I'm really proud of this, what we've been able to accomplish, because maybe try and flesh that out a little bit.
Who do you want to take that?
All of you in any particular order.
I don't think I've had to go first yet, so I'll do that. One of the things that I've always believed to be true about any project is that it doesn't matter how good it looks, whether it's won a design award, how well it performs from an environmental perspective. If it doesn't do the job that it first and foremost needs to do, then it's a failure. And in the case of the Kent Middle School, above all else, what it needs to be is an educational facility. It's a school. And schools are communities unto themselves. And one of the things that existed in their facilities prior to the construction of the middle school was that they actually had two separate buildings. So the sixth grade was off on its own. And they had crafted a narrative saying that it was because they were bringing people in from 100-odd different elementary schools into the same facility, and they wanted to have a chance for that class to bond before they mix them up with the big scary 7th and 8th graders. And that was a narrative that had evolved partly because that's the facilities that they had. That's how they kind of had to sell it. So combining the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade into a single facility was a big step. And the traditions of any school are sometimes pretty obvious, sometimes not so obvious, but they're part of what makes the school what it is. And so it was very daunting knowing that they had all of these traditions and things that we were going to be upsetting, all of these states of equilibrium that had been achieved over 50 plus years in how they operated the school. And there was a new principal for the school that came in, and after being in the school for less than a year, she said that she has never seen a sense of community as strong as what had developed in just that 1 year within the body of the Kent Denver Middle School, between students and faculty and the rest of the staff. So the fact that that building, that project, that site was so successful in bringing them together as a community and allowing them to get on with the business of teaching and learning was really, I think, the single biggest success that I can point to in that project. So very cool.
Are they back in the school now at this point?
They are, yeah. They are taking advantage of some of the spaces that they have in ways that they hadn't anticipated, but they're taking advantage of them. And I think that's one of the other sort of interesting things about projects when you work on them. It's always, I think, gratifying to me to see spaces used in ways that are different than you imagined them to have been originally, but they're flexible enough that they can do that. And so that's another success of the school, is that they are back there. It's all very tenuous, as it is for everybody, I think. But they're in and they're operating the school and having some success. So, yes.
It'd be a real letdown, especially given what you said the principal remarked about what a cohesive effect it had on bringing the community together, to experience that and live in this new building that you're so proud of, and then have to extricate yourself from it because of what we're dealing with right now. So it's
Yes.
good to hear that they're back in and still enjoying it.
Yep.
Mike or Renee, how about some of your proud moments or moves on those projects?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I guess I'm most proud of on this project too is just the process that we had, and kind of going back to this theme a number of times, but I felt like we really had a real kind of team mentality on this one. There was that open collaboration with the owner, the contractor, architect, and all the consultants and our internal staff. And one of the things I really kind of liked too on this one is that the contractor, they called this project their happy place, which was, I don't know, that was pretty amazing too. That there were just a remarkable lack of drama on this one too. That we ended up kind of coming together every week for a couple of years, the design and the building of the project too. And it really felt great at the end too. And we had great kind of like celebration internally with us, but really had some good relationships that were made throughout this project. And I think it really kind of shows in the architecture as well too. It felt like a complete project from all parties, and one of those ones that kind of came in on schedule, on budget, and those are kind of qualifiers on a successful project too. I mean, I think awards is a design excellence thing, which is one of the many kind of prongs that ends up being part of a successful project. But I think we hit a number of different things on this project too, which is great. And I think internally, everyone kind of advanced their knowledge and did some things that were new to them. So I felt like we learned a lot. We had new collaborators that we worked with, and even the less sexy things, it was a profitable project for us too. And, we had a happy client who loves the house. So felt like we kind of clicked on a lot of different things on this one, which really felt great for us.
It sounds like it may have been bittersweet to watch it end though. Of course you want it to be done on time and on budget, and for the contractors to say they're happy, but when you have that experience and it ends, you're sort of like, oh man, how can we do that again, or how can we make this last longer?
No, I think there's there very much was that that kind of aspect too. So we're hopefully lightning strikes again, we all get to work together. But it was certainly fun while we last, and I felt pretty blessed to have that opportunity.
Yeah, that's cool. And Renee?
My response is very similar to Mike's about my project, in that I think what I'm most proud of about this project was the collaboration. We had so much fun designing this project, and I think that really shows. It really comes out in the architecture. We had this really rich collective thinking across all the disciplines: architecture, interiors, building, and landscape. The owner is a good friend of mine, and she was also the interior designer on the project. The builder is a longtime friend of the owner, and it just became this very, very, very fun collaborative process. Problem solving was a fun process. I mean, when do you get to say that about a project? As with all projects, of course there were problems, but they were fun meetings where everyone had different solutions to throw around, and we all fed off each other, and we all learned so much. And I truly think that came out in the final design of the project. Yeah. Also say I was very proud on this project of the decisions we made that significantly reduced cost, material waste, energy. I mean, by reusing that concrete foundation, I was shocked how significant of an impact that made on material use, budget, etc. We were really proud of the good things that came out of that decision, including the design.
Well, architecture is supposed to be fun, and shame on us if we don't say that. I feel like The association doesn't say that enough, and even architects don't. When you talk to them privately, they don't often talk about how joyful and fortunate it is to be in this work. They kind of tend to gravitate toward the harder things, but it is fun. It's people's hopes and aspirations and dreams, all rolled into a physical space. And we spend a ton of time inside those walls, so we better enjoy it. Now, having said that, it's not easy. So what were some of the difficult choices that were made or difficult challenges that you navigated on each of these projects?
I can start with that. I don't know if any of you remember the snowstorm October 2018. I think it was around Halloween. Well, this project, we were racing to get the roof on in that season. And if you saw in the images, there's this beautiful exposed rafters and exposed cedar decking ceiling, which in the process of construction had to be built before the roof was dried in, of course. So we had a huge challenge trying to keep all that weatherproof and dry before that snowstorm hit in October. And yeah, I mean, we solved it and we got through it, but that was definitely not something we anticipated. I think in our climate, you hope to be dried in by September these days, because you never know what's going to happen in October anymore.
Yeah, we had a September 1st snowstorm this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'll jump in and I can speak to just kind of a surprise, I'll call it, from a material perspective. Copper is featured pretty prominently as material on the middle school. And when the copper siding that you see in some of the images started going up, it was a time out, this is not gonna work. It was our own damn fault, but we had specified, frankly, copper that was too thin, and it was starting to oil can, and it also then hadn't been rolled properly. So we, along with the contractor and the subcontractor who was installing it, all put our heads together, and the owner, I would say grudgingly but happily, agreed to pay the difference in cost of going to a little bit heavier copper and to putting some ribs in the copper sheets as it was going up. And what ended up being a real sore spot as it started to go on the building ended up being, I think, rightly the feature that we hoped it would be. And so I think that was the solution to that project was really a partnership between all the participants in the project. And you've heard us say again and again, I think across three of us, that it really does take a village to get these things done. And the importance of the good relationships that we have with our owners and with our contractors is critical to the success of any project.
Yeah, that could have turned out far differently than the way it did.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, one of the, the things that ended up being a little bit of a, a struggle, but actually turned out very, very well on, on our project too, is actually just getting the roof right on ours, where we went through countless kind of iterations on what the roof will look like, how it does, and trying to create that higher volume in the middle and getting a roof that, we felt like was kind of working the way, or an interpretation of how the paintings were working too. And that actually took it took a while before we ended up kind of coming up with the roof that we had, and it was so great when we finally, came up with that solution and that idea. And all of a sudden it just kind of clicked in so many different ways, and integrating, PV on the roof and the way that the light came through, and just giving it a little bit more of a unique presence. And I don't know, it was just, I think that happens sometimes on projects too. You just finally get that epiphany, and then things kind of click and fall in line. And, it was becoming, a struggle, then everything became easy after that point, which really kind of felt like, okay, that's, that's the right move, and that's the right idea too. And, again, that was even kind of working through with that client too. They were, pushed back on a lot of, earlier ideas too. And we ended up kind of coming up with something kind of better too, which is another kind of aspect of that good client too, that they, recognize when something's not working too, and they're, feel free and open and, are able to kind of engage with us in that design discussion, how to make things just better and really work. So that was fun, but it's sometimes, getting to the right solution isn't always easy.
And where were you, Mike, in that process when that decision was made or that epiphany happened?
Oh, we were actually, I think we were in design development, so we had some other earlier schematic too, and we were kind of, making our push to kind of go in for permitting, as well too, and kind of kick back, this isn't right too, and which is great, and I'm totally, thrilled that we ended up kind of making that decision and moving forward, and it's a great too, because it wasn't a less expensive option to kind of go down that road too, but that's what kind of makes the project, so it's totally worth it.
Sometimes a client or a contractor can voice something that you yourself have only felt subconsciously that wasn't sitting right 100% with you, and then once it's voiced, you're like, yeah, I kind of think the same thing. Let's put our heads together and figure this out.
Yeah, and that's on any project too. There are kind of like those no dumb questions, and those good ideas can kind of come from anyone.
Mm-hmm. So I want to, just for a thought exercise here, switch hats. And if you were on a design jury, what would you emphasize more or de-emphasize compared to what you see from a lot of juries that deliberate on architecture and design awards? What are the values that you would choose to elevate or recognize, or that maybe you don't see enough of right now in some of the award recognition programs? And what are the things that, okay, we've seen too much of this, let's move on, we've been there and done that?
I think what would be a really kind of cool aspect would be for the jurors to visit the projects as well too. I mean, I think that would be a wonderful way, because I think, in all these projects too, that you can have great crafted presentations and images, but experiencing the house, may kind of lead to a totally different judgment on it, whether it's craftsmanship or just kind of framed and, really kind of a curated presentation. But going there and experiencing the spaces reveals a lot.
Yeah, I'll say that I think that whatever the core idea is, the rigor of the pursuit of that, and how closely were you able to adhere to whatever those original tenets were that formed the basis of that design. And that's a very big abstract concept, but conversely, I think one of the things that I see that disappoints me sometimes in architecture is what seems to be form for form's sake. And I say that as somebody who's a pragmatist. I need to, because of the project types that I work on, make sure that everything I'm doing has a defensible reason other than, ooh, I liked that little swoop. I mean, there is a place for artistry, obviously. That above all else is what we're doing. But if there's a swoop, for instance, why? Why is there a swoop there? What purpose does it serve? Is there a practical purpose to it, or is it purely artistic? And then if it's purely artistic, what's the rationale for that? Where does it come from? So having a little bit of rigor behind what we do, I think, is really important. I don't always see that in everything that gets published out there. And so of the projects that are recognized by this year's jury, that is absolutely apparent. And I commend the jury for recognizing that. Knowing what I know of these firms and their processes, I think that's indisputable that these projects work and the clients are ecstatic with them. But that's not true of everything that you see out there.
I guess I would say it would be great to know that you don't have to submit projects with high budget, with perfectly professional photography, polished submissions. It would be great to see jurors award projects that are meaningful regardless of the funds that a client or even the architect may have to pay for photography, you know, like even small, any type of project that they find meaningful, which may not be the typical absolutely gorgeous, you know, portfolio of photographs. If someone submits something that shows some really incredible thought process, I think that is equally as important as a super polished submission.
Renee, I'm going to jump on that because you did a project when you were here many years ago that was a beautiful, elegant gas regulator enclosure.
That was a weird project type.
But that's exactly what you're talking about, I think. You know, it didn't have a program other than screening a big ugly gas regulator, but it was a beautifully detailed, elegantly proportioned, artistically rendered fence.
Yes, it was a fence. It was a glorified fence. Yeah, you know, those types of projects should be encouraged to submit. I think it'd be fun for jurors to be, you know, looking at projects of all scales. You know, not being on this particular jury, maybe they did, and maybe there were hundreds of those types of submissions, but something tells me people feel like they have to have perfectly polished photography and high budget projects to submit, and I would encourage otherwise.
I suspect you're right on that presumption, but we can change that. And one thing we are trying to change is to place a greater emphasis on performance of the building, not just aesthetics. So you'll see more of that in the future. Right now, there's a narrative piece that's new on the award submissions where you talk about things like resiliency, sustainability, energy efficiency. And then there's a new category in and of itself for the most sustainable projects. So we envision a day somewhere in the near future where we can't call a design excellent or praiseworthy unless it is also being a good steward of our resources and the planet's future. So stay tuned as we move in that direction, and hopefully the projects will follow. I'd like to end, I guess, with is there any advice you would give to members who are considering submitting a project for consideration and why you think it's worth it? Even if you don't win, there's all, you know, I've submitted personally for a lot of different types of recognition. For me, you know, I'm not an architect, but for folks who work in the field, we can apply for honorary membership. And I remember when I got done with that submission and hit send, it was worth it regardless of the result, because it helped me to process what it was that makes the work important and distinctive. And getting the award, of course, was great. I wouldn't turn it down, but it was almost as if the storytelling that I did for the work was a benefit in and of itself. So what would you tell people who are thinking about whether or not to submit and if it's worth it and how it will change their perception of their own work and how other people see architecture?
I would piggyback on what you just said, Mike, that I think it's really, I mean, just some practical advice. I think people maybe who are submitting for the first time should really try to convey their thought process, their design concept, and how that concept may, or, you know, if it's successful, has been carried out from beginning to through the end of the project. And it's more than just these beautiful photos. It's about trying to articulate your design concept and thought process. And like you were just saying, Mike, even if it's not a winning submission, it's such a useful exercise to go through and, for your own benefit, articulate how you ended up from where you started in the beginning of that design process. And every project is, you know, another iteration and learning experience of your own personal design process, and that the whole the steps that you put yourself through to put together one of these submissions really helps you kind of solidify what's important to you. What matters? What about the architecture really matters to you, and why you think the jury should find it meaningful.
Yeah, I would agree. It's what's the story? And that goes back even for me to before you start working on the project. It's what's the challenge that the client is bringing to you, whether it's a school or a house or anything else. And how then have you responded to that challenge? And it's not just about 2 bedrooms, X number of bathrooms, and so forth. It's what was the challenge of the program? How do these pieces and parts need to work together or be separated from each other or relate to the surrounding sites or integrate with the landscape? There are all these different challenges that are brought to the fore by these different client types that we have. And that's one of the things that we use internally in our marketing. We're trying to decide whether or not to take on a project is what's the story? You know, it's more than, and I realize this is a bit of a luxury, but it's more than just a paycheck. Is there an opportunity for us to respond to an interesting charge, an interesting challenge that the client has for us? And then let's start thinking about what that challenge is. How do we articulate that? And then how do we respond to it and capture that response through the design and construction process? And that's the story that needs to be told in your design submission.
Yeah, I tend to agree with a lot of that. You know, it's kind of a self-assessment and kind of collecting your thoughts and being able to edit, have a clear story, you know, and where that story changes from when you started and where you think it was going to go and what it was, and then actually collecting your thoughts and having to write a narrative about what it actually did, the sustainability aspects of it. You know, maybe that changes, or maybe there's a little post rationalization that kind of goes on, but kind of distilling down to what the essence and what it really is helpful for that during that award process. Yeah, and I actually like going through the photographic process. I think James Florio on this project took some amazing photos, and he did on some others that are too, but it's a kind of another lens to kind of look at their work. And, you know, even walking through the project with them too, they kind of see things that you know, have a different read on it too, which I think is kind of fun when you're kind of going through that process too. And then you get these photos and they have a different, totally different aspect or what they're capturing on it too, which is really kind of fun. So I think there's some talented photographers out there that can help kind of complete that narrative. But yeah, again, not every project does, but if you have the opportunity, good photos, I would recommend.
Well, it's definitely a visual medium, so that counts. Well, I want to thank each of you for number one, for doing great work, and for taking part in the awards program. You know, if we didn't have awards submissions, we wouldn't have much to talk about. So the fact that you had a great client and a really collaborative team and a strong idea of where you wanted to go with those projects, you know, the proof's in the result. So these are our Design Excellence Awards winners for 2020. Bryan, Mike, Renee, well done, and thanks for sharing some of the things that you did along the way. Really good conversation.
So thank you, Mike, for hosting. Renee, Mike, nice to see you.
Thanks, Bryan. Good to see
You
you.
as well. Thank you, guys.
See you, Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Well, a couple months before we close, next week, same time on Wednesday, we have a session for those who would like to learn more about the 2018 IECC for commercial and some of the changes that are in that code. So be sure to join us for that conversation. And then 2 weeks from now, October 14th through 16th is our practice and design conference, which will be virtual this year. We've got a great lineup of speakers and topics to entertain, inspire, and educate you. And so we hope to see you there. Until next time, have a great week and keep up the good work. Take care.